What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? With the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the quest to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. And today with me on the show is Pernille Jacobsen, who tells me everything I need to know about forum theater. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, lean back, enjoy the show, and visit workshops.work to download my free one-page summary. Enjoy. Hello, Pernille.
Hello, Miriam.
Nice to have you on the show.
Also nice to be here.
And we'll talk about forum theater today.
Yeah.
And you posted a little message on LinkedIn yesterday, and I was very excited to see all the reactions. So I'm looking forward to learn more about it. And before we dive into the topic, maybe you can start with giving us a little bit of context about your story. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Oh, yeah. So for the past 20 years, I've been running my own company. I've been using forum theater, storytelling, improvisation when I've been working with development of individuals and organizations. And actually, I never really knew what to call myself. So it was like, am I a consultant? Am I an actor, an improviser? And I really felt happy when I heard the term facilitator because I could identify with that. And before I was making my company, I was in university. And all the time I was in university, I always felt like I was sitting between two chairs. So, and I think it had to do with I was going to university, reading all this theoretical stuff. And when I was off university, I was doing theater improvisation. So I had the feeling that I was sitting between two chairs, one chair that was very theoretical, one chair that was very creative and practical, one chair that was academic, one chair that was creative. And I always saw it as my really weak point, that I wasn't able to actually pick one chair and grow up. And today it actually turns out that it's my ability to switch between many chairs that makes me a really strong facilitator. And I also think that is what a great facilitator can, is actually to make these switches. And for me, that is what the name facilitator gives me. It's actually, it allows me to see it as my strong point, that I have a lot of chairs.
Wonderful. So what would be the hashtag that you would choose for yourself then?
So the first thing that came into my mind when you asked it, because you actually asked it on on an email some days ago, and what came into my mind was, let's try it out. And it's because I think in so many situations, I think we should stop talking, stop brainstorming, stop explaining, and actually start practicing and experimenting. And today we will talk about forum theater, and actually that is about creating a space where people dare to try something out that they didn't finish all, but just spontaneously try it out with your body and your voice. So the hashtag would be, let's try it out. And then, of course, before I fell asleep last night, another hashtag came to me. So if it should be really a hashtag for me, it should actually be, tell me your story. Because that is my true passion. That is actually to hear story from everyday life, from you and from every participator in a workshop. And my passion is to see people actually share stories. So, I mean, I love forum theater, but I also have another darling, and that has to do with stories. So I develop conversational games out of paper and carbon, physical games. I have made a very simple game with 100 story cards, one fan timer, simple rules about listening and telling. It's called Snap Stories. And I will tell you, when I see people lean in and share stories about their first bike, about a smell from their childhood, about a ceremony they was a part of, it just feels like home. And I have the feeling, if I have one contribution to this world as a facilitator, it's that. To create space for sharing stories and to create space for caring, listening. Yeah. So I choose that hashtag, tell me a story.
Thank you. That's a very nice one. And some listeners might not be familiar with the term forum theater. Mm-hmm. And from what you explain, I keep on thinking of improv theater. So I wonder, what is the difference?
So I think I will start to explain what I think forum theater is. Mm-hmm. And I think that forum theater is a very powerful and very concrete tool if you want to learn about relationships and communication. If you want to learn about power in groups and organizations. And it is so powerful because it activates your body, your mind, your senses, your imagination, and your courage, because you actually have to try things out that you don't know if they will work. So to me, forum theater is actually the closest you get to life. And when you do forum theater, it's possible to play with life, to zoom into everyday life, to try out new roles, to be in someone else's shoes. So I think that forum theater is a collective way to study human interaction.
So how can I imagine it? Is it then, how can I visualize a standard forum theater exercise? Would you then just point at a certain situation and ask the participants to play it out?
Yeah. So I think that forum theater comes as many versions as people working with forum theater. Mm-hmm. So I can explain how I would do it. Yes. And how I would do it with my closest forum theater friend, who's called Henrik, and we used to do improv together. So what we usually would do is that we would play 3 scenarios that has to do with the topic of the day. Mm-hmm. So the topic could be equality. It could be, what is it like to feel home? Mm-hmm. It could be, how do we actually communicate better with our customers? So we would always develop the scenarios in collaboration with whoever asked us to come, so that we are sure that they are accurate and the participators will be able to identify. Mm-hmm. So, and because we did this theater improvisation together, the way we do forum theater starts with the joy from improvisation. Mm-hmm. So we will always play these scenes in a light, playful way and twist it a little bit so we get the humor in. And then when the audience, maybe there would be 20 people, there would be 200 people, they would vote for the scenario that resonates mostly with them. The scenario that holds dilemmas they can identify with. Mm-hmm. So in this way, we will create ownership. It's not like we're coming with something that, for example, your leaders chose, this would be good for you, to you. But actually the participators get to choose which one to work with. And then we have a lot of different techniques that helps them actually to get on stage and try out new things.
Okay, so if you're working for a client and you're using the tool of forum theater, would the participants of the workshop then actively be in the scene from the beginning? Or you start playing and then they join in, as you just mentioned?
A lot of times, actually, we will start playing because we were trained as actors, and therefore we can actually play something that they would say, okay, that is exactly what it's like to be me. And this will help them actually to dare to go on stage and give their perspective. But you can also do it the other way around, where it's actually the participators who is doing the scene. I like to let actors be in the scene in the start, and when people gets really involved, they just run on stage and then they want to be a part of the play.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then how do you get the information for the scene? Would you conduct interviews beforehand with your clients?
Yeah. So we would have a meeting with our client, and maybe, for example, we were doing a big job for the municipality of the city I live in, where we should work with 3,000 care helpers, in smaller groups. And then we would have a talk with the leaders. They would explain about their vision. They had a really beautiful vision about, they called it loving municipality. Such a beautiful vision, and it said power to the citizens, involvement of the families, from care worker to rehabilitation, from employee to co-creator, less rules, more creativity, and it just sounded like paradise, like the world all of us would live in. And then we actually spent some time with the care helpers. So we went on bike with them from 7 a.m. in rain and in sunshine, and we saw a complete different picture from the one the leaders gave us, or from it was so different from the vision. So we saw people fighting to do a good job. We saw lonely young people, drug addicts, violent people, and we saw that you never know what is behind the next door. So we saw that there was a big tension between the dream and the vision and the actual lived life. And our task was actually to make it possible to let the voices and the stories heard from the lived life. So we would create like a scenario that the care helpers could really identify with. We would create scenarios where they could see how they struggled. And they could say, that's not okay. And we could say, please come on stage and tell us how it should be. So somehow we were there to actually make these stories come alive, so that the leaders who actually made the vision could start figuring out, how can we actually bring this alive?
Would you then also use the tool of provocation on stage to trigger this uncomfortable dialogue that is needed in the case where the vision and reality are so detached?
So can you give me a picture? What could provocation be?
So if you really point at the difference between the vision and the reality, and to really speak it out.
When you do foreign theater, it's really concrete. But actually, I think the care workers got a little bit provoked by my role, because I was playing a role where I really tried to live up to every single thing in the policy, and they just found me so annoying, so too much energy, too young. So in a way that provoked them, and then they could come on stage with maybe help me to find a more mature way to actually fill out my job function. Yeah, so some will be provoked, but in a good way.
So the way how I understand it is that you represent the affected and thereby help them to communicate via exaggeration, maybe via pointing out the truth, and then enabling or facilitating also those on the bottom to really speak up and take a seat.
Yeah, so and that is the core of forum theater. And that is why, my world almost fell apart and built up again when I heard about forum theater the first time, because I was doing this theater sports, and I was just amazed how liberating it was for me to actually be able to go on stage in front of a live audience and not knowing what to do, and that it was possible, because I was trained in university, and there I couldn't raise my voice before I had read all literature about the subject. So I was really interested in theater at that time, and not theater that you see like in a theater, but theater. Yeah, but theater that actually is investigating what is it like to be a human being. And then I came across this article about Augusto Boal, and he's from Brazil. He was living in the 70s, and at that time it was a dictatorship in Brazil. And he was driving in the countryside out to the workers. And he was like, they were just sitting there, and he was like, why don't you revolt? This is not okay. And they would say, with apathy, our voice is not heard. No one is interested in our perspective, in our stories. And Augusto Boal would drive away rather depressed. And the next day he would come back with a wagon with actors on, and the actors would play what they saw from the workers. And they would just keep on going until someone in the audience would say, that is not all right. That's not okay. And then Boal would say, then please come on stage and break the oppression. And that was his belief, that actually to change people from passive spectators to active participators. And he truly believed that if you trained it on stage, you would also be training it in real life. And it just spoke so deeply to me, this idea. And I just had the feeling I want to create spaces for that. Also because, the feeling the workers had resonated with me. I've been in so many situations in school, in university, in relationships, where I had the feeling that my voice wouldn't be heard, and therefore I didn't raise it. And to me, I want to create spaces where you feel that you're getting heard and you can express yourself.
And there are two things that come to my mind. One is role play. And how would you relate forum theater to role play? And the other one are constellations, which might be maybe the extreme form, but it's also acting out in the space.
So there's a lot of people that would be a little bit skeptic about forum theater, and therefore a lot of times we won't use the theme. We won't use the word theater. We will just say we will come and show you some situations, and it's because, especially in Denmark, people have a lot of bad experiences with role play. So, for example, you have been on an education, you learned a theory, and then you use role play to check if you understood everything. So it's like an exam. And then, you're in the middle, you're expressing yourself, and then it's like, oh no, that's not what we learned. So the big difference in forum theater is there will be no right answers. There will only be investigations and experiments.
Yeah.
And therefore also if we have a client who asks us to go for a specific answer to the dilemma, we will say, then ask an expert that has an answer to them. Then you should use forum theater. You should be willing to experiment and investigate.
Yeah. And would the participants who then join the scene, would they act out themselves, or would they also put themselves into the shoes of maybe someone else?
Forum theater will never be therapy. So it's not like drama therapy where you act yourself out. What we are investigating in forum theater is dilemmas that most people can see themselves into. So it's like common dilemmas. And when we go to, for example, a company and play forum theater, we would never say, now we play a scene from this company. We would say, this is a scene, this is something that could happen somewhere else in Denmark. So we actually make general dilemmas. So when Miriam goes on stage, she's like more trying things out in this story and not so much trying things out as Miriam.
Because then there's less pressure. I have permission to also say something in an experiment, and there's no judgment.
Exactly. Yeah.
No finger pointing to something that's going wrong in this particular context.
And then at the same time, Miriam can never go on stage without taking Miriam with her. So we will see some of you, But it's not like you have to stand up for everything you try out on stage. It's more like you are getting rewarded because you actually dare to try things out. And then if you see people go on stage and try things out that maybe will provoke the rest of the audience, it's my job as a facilitator to actually help you to look good. So maybe I will ask you, Miriam, what was the idea behind what you did? So after you try it out, is there something that you would like to strengthen in the way you communicate to really get across with your idea? Yeah.
I have a very practical facilitation question regarding that, because I can imagine when Miriam goes on stage and she acts out something, and then you ask her to explore and explain why she chose this role in the scene. I can imagine that it feels kind of threatening if I'm still standing on stage and then asked to share. So would you do this debrief then sitting in a circle to create some psychological safety, or how do you go about that debriefing phase without?
Yeah. So my biggest role model when it comes to forum theater is called Katrin Bureus. She lives in Sweden. She has been writing a lot of books about forum theater. And I have been in a lot of practical workshops with her, and she would always say that if you ask someone to go on stage, it's like you ask them actually to sit down a little bit, and they get vulnerable. Yes. And as soon as they have contributed in that way, you should help them to sit up again and take them away from the center.
Beautiful.
So I would always try that. So if Miriam goes on stage, I would prefer to ask the rest of the audience, what did we really like about what we just saw here? What were the values behind? What were the strengths? So I would only ask you to explain a little more if I feel like you didn't really come across with your idea.
Okay, so basically to give me the opportunity to really make my point clearer and make me look good. That's the thing in improv, right? You always try to make your partner look good.
Yeah, and in improv you also have, you would always say that the person who jumps on stage is safe. It's all the spectators who has the responsibility that this will work out. And that's my responsibility as a facilitator. That is really to protect the one who dares to go on stage.
Yeah.
And then, of course, because the person who is going on stage will interact with Henrik and me, and we are actors and improvisers. So we can also in the play actually help to lift this person because it has a lot to do what kind of response you get back as an actor.
Yeah.
So as a forum theater actor, you need to learn the skill not to stick too much to the role, but actually to do whatever is needed to make the person who's new on stage look good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times, because a lot of drama is about creating conflict. So if you're an untrained forum theater actor, you will go too much into conflict, and then it's too hard to go on stage for the audience. So you need to help them a little bit.
So how would you do that?
So that would be actually to make them have an effect on my figure. So something that Augusto Boal was very interested in is that you cannot make magic sticks on stage. So it's not like we had this big dilemma. Someone comes with a solution, now there's nothing anymore. So you can't do the magic stick, but you can be aware that you're not too aggressive or too fun in the way you relate to the one who goes on stage.
And would these forum theater interventions, would there be always kind of closed workshops, or would you combine forum theater with other forms of facilitation?
I really like to work in a very, can you say, not dogmatic? Do you know what?
Yes. Non-dogmatic.
Yeah. So I'm not so interested in, if you should call it forum theater, storytelling, improvisation, systemic thinking, design thinking, whatever. I just take whatever works out in the context I'm working in. And also, if I should refer to Katrin Bureus again, the strong woman in Sweden, she would always say that you shouldn't let the tool be in front,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if I'm hired to do foreign theater and I have the feeling that the best thing would be to just share stories, then I should just, throw away foreign theater and do something else, because people don't care about what it's called. They care about, does this work?
Yeah, very true. What do you think what have you as a facilitator learned from your practice in foreign theater? Or maybe the other way around, what have you learned in foreign theater from being a facilitator?
From foreign theater, I just experience again and again how important it is to integrate the body in the work. So you don't just use your mind. And I also again and again see how liberating fiction is. It just helps our creativity on its way. It helps us to play, and we just get so many solutions. We see so many ways together if we use fiction, because it's like if it's too close to our own life, we get fixed. We can only see one solution.
Good point. Yeah. I can see that. Mm-hmm.
And then you asked me, what have I learned from foreign theater? And to me, to practice foreign theater has always been some kind of self-development, because all the scenes we play on stage is so interesting to me, because I can see myself in them. Every time I'm like, I don't know what we should do here. What can we do? And then people will come with all kind of creative ideas. And that's just like, I see myself in the world in a new way every time. So I think that foreign theater has been the most amazing way to study human interaction. Also in the way that people actually come along when we do foreign theater. So do they use a lot of time explaining and explaining, or do they just jump on stage and try it out? Do they spend a lot of time defending themselves, or do they just laugh? And how can I create the space for more trying out, more laughing? And then it also learned me about the whole sensory level, that it's amazing how different things we can get away with depending on which body, which voice is doing it. So it's like there's no standard solution when it comes to relation and communication, because it has so much to do with how you use your voice, how you use your body, how you use the space, and how you relate to someone else.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag and drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
Another practical question. I wonder to what extent you brief the participants or the audience that will then participate in advance about maybe say some ground rules or how to do that, and how do you give them the courage to actually jump on stage?
Yeah, I mean, you also asked me about what is your favorite exercise.
Yes.
And I really like to make ground rules through practicing instead of through talking, because I have the feeling if I talk ground rules, it actually sometimes works the opposite way, right? Don't be afraid. Now I'm afraid. So for me, my favorite exercise is to help people to share small stories with each other. So I would invite everyone to leave their chair and come on the floor with me. I would invite them to find someone who has kind and friendly eyes. And I would tell them, that's a great rule in life. Always seek the friendly eyes. I would ask them to say hello to each other and tell a story about last time they were happy. And I will ask them not to tell about the time in life when they were happiest, like when they found out who they should marry or found their religion, but just last time. So maybe there was their favorite cereal this morning. Maybe the neighbor smiled in such a warm way. Maybe they get a hug from their kid. Maybe there was a smell of lilies when they opened the door. And I asked them to dare to take the offer, to take the first thing that pops into their mind and share it. And after that, we can have a reflection about creating a room where you can actually act spontaneously without feeling that you are judged. And we can talk about the power of actually caring, listening, and stuff like that. So they actually feel in their body that this is all right. So I like to do it in that way. So actually, through practice, make this playful space where you dare to take chances. And also that you find out that courage is not about doing the biggest, most crazy thing. Courage is also about daring to bring out a little detail.
I'm now curious about zipping up, as you nicely phrased it, the entire room. So how do you bring that home actually? Because the forum theater is a way to express what is there, to explore what could be maybe. And then how do you debrief? Because I can imagine that this is then where the uncomfortable part starts, where you have actually to talk about reality and about your own role and the own stance.
Yeah, I think something comes before that, and that is how you actually prepare the audience to go on stage. And I like them to be creative in groups, so it's like we will play a dilemma, and then we ask people to be together 2 and 2 or 3 and 3, and actually to find the very concrete things they can say and do on stage. And so you have the feeling it's not like something I figured out alone and now I have to stand up for it, but we actually did it together in a playful way. And then you don't sit so much down. So I just like to help people to work in smaller and more private groups. Yeah, I don't know if that is some of the answer. So you ask me again, what was the question?
And you're totally right. So now you said, how do you prepare them in a first stage with your favorite exercise? Then it's smaller groups instead of just the big stage. And then how do you close it? So how the debriefing, the bringing the stage into reality.
Yeah. So yeah, that is always the biggest question, because now we gave people an experience and how do they actually transfer it? But I think one of the strong thing with forum theater is that you actually work so concrete. So you see things that you can actually take and do tomorrow. So you can ask the audience. So now we saw 10 different ideas about what to do in this situation. Please go out in your teams and share with each other which one of these solutions could actually work with your body, with your mind, with your voice. And play, or maybe in groups of 2, find your next step. Write down the context and maybe also what you would like to say and what you would like to do. And then we would return to, this is not about finding the right solution. This is about actually daring to play with life and try out new things. So it's not about that what you do will change the world. It's about that you actually try out new things and see what is working for you. Yeah.
And I imagine since they have experienced it together, then the aha moment is also clearer. So you might not need to put it on paper and agree on a deadline and roles and responsibilities, because it will feel so natural.
I hope so. Yeah.
Best case scenario.
Best case scenario. So actually, I'm teaching in a small education for facilitators about being a better facilitator. And they respond that actually forum theater, this thing of trying things out, being in the other one's shoes, is actually some of the strongest when it comes to building up courage to try a new thing. And, because it's in an education, we can spend like half a day after forum theater to do all these things we will do as a facilitator, find out what do you do already you should continue with, what did you see that you should do but you don't do it, stuff like that, and then spend time doing that.
So you use forum theater to train facilitation?
Yeah, I do.
Awesome.
So the core dilemma for most facilitators is often like, what do I do if I work with a silent group?
Yeah.
What do I do if one in the group is very aggressive? What do I do if I feel that there's something here, but I can't really point it out? And to play these situations, to see me being the facilitator that you know from yourself, and actually to try to be the audience and feel what is the audience feeling when there's aggression, or if they don't want to respond. And then we can play with what could be the worst thing Pernille, the facilitator, should do now. Yeah, the worst thing would be to actually explain what you just said with an even higher voice, very closely to the audience. And then all of a sudden we can see a lot of times we're doing what we shouldn't do when the audience is silent. And then it gets, integrated in the body in another way. Also, I think it's something very strong about forum theater is that you recognize that what you struggle with is not something only you struggle with. All facilitators is struggling with it. So we actually create spaces for conversations that wouldn't be held otherwise. Yeah.
And I guess that many things will come up on stage and while playing that maybe you weren't even aware of beforehand.
Yeah.
So it's just by jumping in and letting the body speak and the mind kind of joining the flow.
Yeah, so that would be a lot of quiet knowledge that you can actually try to put words into afterwards. But it's also to see, for example, as a facilitator, all of a sudden you understand why we get so tired. Because I find from myself and from fellow facilitators that a lot of times I don't understand that it takes so much energy to me. But when you see it from the outside in a forum theater situation, it's just like, hey, man, what you're standing in as a facilitator. Yeah.
According to you as a facilitator, what makes workshops fail?
Yeah. What makes workshops fail? I think it is when you forget to activate the participants and you do all the work yourself as a facilitator. And this happens a lot when you're working with quiet participants. And you start working as a facilitator, and then the workshop will fail. I think workshops fail when everything gets too abstract, too theoretical, and too serious. So I think that you should add something very practical and something playful. And I think that workshops fail when participants doesn't feel ownership, when what we do is too far away from their lived life. So if I should turn around the question, what will make workshops work? I think that you should create active participators from the start. I think that you should add something practical and very playful. I think you should create ownership. And then I should also think that it's very important to create a safe place where you can actually express yourself and play.
Yeah. And you mentioned now twice the challenge of working with a silent group. So what is your strategy when the group goes silent and when you see, okay, the energy is maybe low or they don't feel safe enough to speak up or they just are not engaged in the topic?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I think one of the really important skills of a facilitator is to make shifts. So if you have been working in a very high energy way, maybe you should try out something more like a meditation, or you should try out with something that takes silence. So I think something that we should use more as facilitators actually is to give people the possibility to reflect on their own. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of times we ask them, go in pairs, go in groups, and you would talk to the whole group, just like say, so how does this resonate with you? Please just sit in silence for 3 minutes, and then you can ask them to flow write, to make a drawing, to make a mind map, because this will give space for introvert persons or people who are a little bit tired because it's morning to actually connect with themselves. And this will also give space for very extrovert people to actually not say every idea aloud, but maybe like put them through a filter. So I think you should dare to help people to work alone, and also to create spaces of pauses and silence.
Yeah. What I hear is also this awareness that a group being silent might reflect their reaction on your own energy. So if you are very high in energy, as you said, and the group goes silent, maybe this means that you need to slow down a little bit and adjust your own style of facilitation.
Exactly. And this is, when we were going to talk together today, it's, my adrenaline is starting to run, and I have prepared, and I have so many things I would like to say. And this sets a tempo. And sometimes I should just calm down and meet with you before I take off. And I see fellow facilitators, and I see myself very often to set the tempo too high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are so enthusiastic. We are so much in the doing that we forget the being and just step back.
Yeah.
And having an interview in times of Corona and lockdown, it would be weird not to ask the question, how do you translate forum theater or your entire facilitation practice now to the maybe remote environment? Do you think that there is space for forum theater in the remote world?
So the first thing that happens to me when we have to live in the remote world is that I turn into an 85-year-old woman, and I feel like, can I sit here and knit and listen to my radio, and then the young people, they can run out and figure this out, and please call me when it's over. So that's the first thing that happens, because all the buttons you have to do and whatever. I just like to be in the same room with people and sit around a fire and share stories. And then, I understand that this won't have an end. We have to meet remote. So I've been spending a lot of time investigating how can you build relations on Zoom. How do you actually get across, what do you call it, not the stage, but the computer? How do I actually send my energy right to Miriam so that you get engaged? And that is what I've been doing workshops about, because I think that is what triggers people the most when it comes to meeting online. It is that we can't really read each other. We don't think we can relate. We get more vulnerable, but we won't show it. Yeah. So I think for people like us facilitators, it opens up a completely new market. And I have actually realized that you can build online friendships, but you have to spend a lot of time actually in a more informal conversation, actually to get to know each other a little bit better. So, but I'm really looking forward to the day where we can do forum theater live again, because it has so much to do with the space, the body, and the voice. Yeah.
I just finished a remote improv class, which was very interesting because it was also a lot about experimentation. What can work online and what actually doesn't work online. especially if you have bandwidth problems and there's maybe a delay due to the internet connection, then improv very often doesn't work anymore. So, and I'm curious, your experience, do you think that participants are more willing to then stand up and contribute in the forum theater when it's online, or are they more reluctant?
I think that a lot of the things I do is great online, and some of the things I do, I wouldn't even like to do online. Yeah. So actually, when I'm not working in my company, I dance Argentine tango, and I also actually teach it. And I did that one time online, and I was like, I'm not going to do that again because it doesn't work for me.
A partner is kind of odd.
So, and I also would feel somehow the same way with forum theater, but I know that there's a few people in Denmark who is actually experimenting with it. So I'm looking forward to see how it's working out.
Yeah, because what I found interesting yesterday is at one point we had one person playing out a scene, and I think it was just an advertisement for a random product, and the other person was doing the sound for it.
Mm-hmm.
So was speaking, doing the voiceover. And that was an exercise that actually works fantastically online, maybe even better than on site.
Yeah, that's true. What I experience when we work online as facilitators or improvisers or tango dancers is that we need so much more structure to feel safe.
Yes.
And we also need to end the work within an hour because then we get tired. So for me, that has been the key word. And also to understand that we're just so much more vulnerable because we can't read each other. So during this period, actually, I have been hit much more by when people has given me feedback. I felt it was negative, and stuff like that. And when you're doing improv and when you're doing forum theater or you're dancing tango, you really need to create the safe space. So I think you should spend much more time if you do forum theater or theater sports online.
Yeah. For a moment, I was hesitating about the vulnerability. And the thing that then came to my mind was that in a physical space, you get these eye contacts, you get a twinkle or a smile from someone to encourage you, to give you the kind of very intimate moment that everything is okay and everything is as it should be. But on Zoom, when you have all these different pictures, you cannot relate in these instinct moments. So this makes you also more vulnerable because you lack feedback.
Yeah, and so you should call for feedback all the time. Yeah, and you should go more into conversations about how does this feel for you, and maybe actually we can open up for conversations more about that and take it out to real life afterwards. Because otherwise, if you don't have this conversation, people might look really strong when they're doing improv on Zoom. And then they might be really vulnerable afterwards and they wouldn't have anyone to talk with. And then after a while, they would say, okay, I'm just going to start bawling instead because this is too tough for me. Yeah. Yeah. So we need to take very much care of each other when we meet online.
Yeah. More check-ins. I like that.
Yeah.
Wow. So what is your vision of forum theater in 2021?
Actually, my vision would be to unite more as forum theater players. Because I think we can strengthen the field if we get together. And when Augusto Boal came to Denmark in the 80s, he met up with Katrin Vireus from Sweden, and he was like, where are the oppressors? I don't see them. Because and then he was like, after a few days, I know it's in their head.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. So he saw that the kind of forum theater he invented was invented in a context in the 70s in Brazil. So what kind of forum theater is needed in 2020? And I think we actually should come together and develop that together, because we do it in so different ways. And at the same time, we're standing on the same values. And I feel that every time I meet up with these forum theater people.
Beautiful. The oppressors we are our own oppressors.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah, we have a very strong technique that also was developed by Augusto Boal. He calls it cups in the head.
Mm-hmm.
So we play this situation where I meet up with you, Miriam, and you're criticizing me, and I can't really respond. And then we're asking who's standing in Pernille's head and what are they saying?
Mm.
And then we would bring an audience on stage for each voice. So one would say, I think her mother is standing in there. And she would say, come on, speak up for yourself. And another one would say, I think an old teacher is saying, this is exactly what we talked about, Pernille. Now you should be strong words. And then we have a lot of people gestalting each voice. And we will play the scene again with Miriam and Pernille. And then at the same time, hear all the voices coming closer and closer, yelling higher and higher. And then we would see, oh my God, what a work we have. And everyone else can't see it, that I have all these voices in my head.
That is so powerful. What I see is that you create this safety and reassurance that all these other people that would speak out a voice in your head can relate to you. This must create extremely strong bonds, I can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
This exercise. Yeah.
It does. And it also, it also creates a lot of creativity and fun, because it's fun just to be one of the voices.
Yeah.
And the hard thing is actually the ones who are seeing it from the outside, because they see, oh my God, what a struggle.
And we all have that. It also creates this common understanding that we are not alone with our monkey minds and all these voices.
Yeah. And then we could start talking about how can we as a working culture actually support each other when we feel like that? How can we create spaces for conversation where we can actually talk about, that's how I feel. And when you've seen it at forum theater, you can say, do you remember Pernille and all the voices in her head? That's exactly how I feel now. Please help me to take them away. Please don't create more voices, because I have enough.
Great. I cannot imagine that we already spoke for an hour. So if someone fell asleep after minute 1 and just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to the entire show again, what would you like them to take away?
I would like them to take away that we should try things out more and discuss and talk less. Just let's try it out. And I would like them to take out that the most caring thing you can do is to actually listen to another person's story and share your own.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your enthusiasm for forum theater. It's nice. Unfortunately, the audience cannot see your shiny eyes when you speak about it. It's nice to see. Thank you, Pernille.
Thank you for asking, Miriam.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.